You're live. It's go live time. You know, I should really think about getting a second monitor even on the laptop, but I am somewhat religiously opposed to the concept. I like, similar to how I use Vim, to not take my eyes away from the screen. I mean, I can glance away, maybe a second monitor wouldn't hurt, but for right now, it's just extra moving parts. So at talking like this, I even forget what my keyboard shortcut is. But I'm doing a new blog entry. If you ever forget, you can do :register, and you can look at your registers, and you can see all your different @ symbols. So it's @J, of course, for journaling. You can see it there next to the J here. I search for beginning of journal, and then I do this little thing that does this, creates a new entry, and it spaces it exactly right so that just in case I didn't want the entry from yesterday to distract, it gets pushed off the bottom of the screen. And then this kind of cute little banner, because I always talk about rabbit holes and chasing the rabbits, is shown nicely here with just the right space at the top, beginning of journal highlighted because of the recent search. And I kind of promote pip install MLSEO, all kinds of good. So this video is going to be about APIs and not giving up when learning them. That's the main thing. But I am going to start out with another dramatic reading, with another reading. I don't have to be dramatic about it. With another reading of my morning bathtub. You don't need to know that. My morning notes, my morning thoughts. So those morning thoughts are, as usual, in Apple Notes. They start out actually in Simple Note, which I always quit out of because it is conducive to oversharing. Apple Notes, because of this nice folder system here, I can just put what I want to show in Publish, and then I just select all, copy it, and I move over. I make sure you can hear me, right? I go over here. Oh, that one, what was that? Audio input capture. Geez, someone surfed away again. I did it again. I am so sorry. I have to watch that so carefully. So, there I go again, having to edit the beginning of this. I'll probably cut in right about here. Hello, everyone. It's Mike Levin. It is Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. Today is a day off from work for my move, and I unfortunately got a rainy day. I'm not doing the move. It's a packing day. My move will be a little bit later, but I am packing and putting as much into storage as possible, so I have as little as possible in my new place. And that in itself is a lesson about APIs. So today's video is about APIs and not giving up when learning them. And I'll start out with another reading of my morning thoughts, right? So that is where I was going over here to Apple Notes, where I like to do it. And I copy it. I actually start out in Simple Note and copy it into Apple Notes. It's kind of like that funnel of idea processing I was showing you yesterday. Things start out in a really rough form, and I guess I'll do that in order to get one more screen up so I can always feel free to draw. It never hurts to, actually that's not where I want it. I would prefer the streaming always to the leftmost and the art software here. I'll try not to do too many sub-references. I like to start out with a nice white color until I have reason for some other color. So as usual, things are a funnel. And the funnel is just much more wide at the beginning than one would think. Funnels start out much wider than one would think, and usually following a curve similar to a 1/x power curve, which is in all things in life. The funnel restrains down very rapidly and it becomes like infinitely thin. This is very thin, and this is very wide. So idea capture is again like the rolling ocean, the rolling ocean. This is your idea capture. There's a lot of it coming down. It's kind of sprinkling down on the water like rain. Idea capture is just always going on in your life. It's never not happening. It's hitting your gray matter. And so tiny little bits of it pass through this magical transformation. They become purple because anything that you take note of here is, captured, transformed, materialized into the real world. Captured, and that's materialized. It exists. It exists in the world of matter. And it further gets refined through the power of will. In fact, it shouldn't look like more rain. It should look like something with a top level hierarchy and other things. So as it starts to enter down in here, it takes on hierarchical form, right? So over here, if we go back to this color for a moment, it's really key value. Here's a key, and it unlocks a value. And that's for fast capture. And that's what you see here in my journals. This is fast capture over here. This is not refined ideas. I'm starting the process of refinement, and you're seeing the refinement start to take place more and more often. But this is the rain falling down of the idea capture. And I'll turn on Karnak so you can see what I'm about to do here keystroke wise, because this is non-wrapped text. And this is a big issue in text editing, wrapped versus non-wrapped text. And I'm interested in what y'all have to say. So I pop out my chat and I go through my little ritual. Yes, powered toys could improve this, but I like doing it like this. Arrow snap under Windows is really nice. So why do I stay on Windows? There's a lot about Windows that is really nice. Want to see arrow snap? That's arrow snap, right? Even Linux and Mac don't get that right. Want to see a screen snapshot? Here's my stylus. Boom. Screen snapshot. Want to see me draw on it? I can draw pictures. This is my chat. Want to see me erase something? I flip it around to the back and I can erase. So try and get, integration like that on a Linux desktop. You're not going to get it. This is what you get for being on a Microsoft laptop, and the equipment isn't that expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So there's reason to be on Windows, enough reason that I build it into my logo here. And this is my new website taking form here. I'm doing little things. These are all broken links right now. These are real. These are real. These are broken, and this is broken. But I'll talk a little bit more about these things in a moment after I show you the formatting of the idea capture, which, as I was saying, starts out down here with Shift V for full line visual select, visual line. You can see it written down at the bottom lower left here, visual line. I hit the K key to just go up to the top, and then I go to where the wrapping should start. And then instead of my normal key selection, VIPGQ, which is visual selection inside paragraph format, I just do GQ, which formats it with the line wraps. Now it's got hard returns at the text width setting that I have set. You might be like, oh, well, what text width setting? Well, I can go BLAST, which is now, I got to save it, BLAST, which is now my vimrc, always in my last buffer. And you can see that for all markdown file format types, I set text wrap to 79, one less than 80. And my vimrc is becoming much more alive. It's much more cleaned up than it used to be. I'm documenting my macros as I go. I have macros that I almost never do in through E in order to do tagging of my journal. So a little bit of organization is coming to the journal through a category tagging system I'm using through my own content management system called Skite. You can check it out in GitHub. It's not really for prime time. You would kind of consider it an alpha, but I can go back to B2, which is the journal we're talking about. And this is where I start the dramatic reading. It's not dramatic. Don't be dramatic. It's just a reading of my morning ideas. So don't let anyone or anything stop you. The world and many of its players don't want you advancing in levels. It lessens them in their own minds. They think in terms of scarcity and zero-sum games. A zero-sum game is where a fixed amount of reward is divvied out to winners and losers at the end. Whether or not existence is a game of zero sums is a function of whether life itself can overcome entropy and infuse more matter organizing information into existence than the loss through the second, quote, scrambling law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics, I sometimes get it confused with the third, but the second law of thermodynamics is that heat dissipates, things scramble. You can't pull things back into the order that they started out, and that provides kind of like the one-way direction of time, the arrow of time people attribute it to. And not all heat information can be converted into organized matter. That's the heat loss. But who knows, maybe it can. We are each Maxwell's demon. And I really should have had a Maxwell's demon set up over here in my tabs. I'll do that because everyone needs to know about Maxwell's demon. It's been discredited because even demons have to eat. But Maxwell's demon basically says that if you have a system where the coffee and the cream have mixed, and then you've got some sort of demon controlling a door in the middle, who can open the door at just the right time, you can unmix the cream from the coffee and reverse the arrow of time and bring order bring order back to where normally chaos resides just by having a decision maker in the middle. Now, it's been discredited because the demon, it's information itself, it needs to observe, it needs to be sentient. And having the energy to be sentient, to be a thinking being, takes the consumption of heat energy. And also the pulling on this little rope takes energy itself. So there's all kinds of, they thought it was a closed system, but it's really an open system fallacy to that. So, but nonetheless, there is some credibility to the question of whether sentience overcomes entropy. And this is why I'm guiding you towards Linux daemons under System D. It gives us a path towards actually becoming Maxwell's demon, who by entropy defeating thought experiments can unstir the milk from the coffee or unsmash a glass. All you need is a guiding hand on the application program interface of reality, on the API of reality. That's what sentience is, being the Maxwell's demon. Coffee's on the left, cream's on the right, mix them. Now put a wall down the center. I'm just telling you what I just showed you over there. That's where I would have flipped over to the picture. And the problem is that sentience takes energy, as does opening and closing a door. Nothing's free in this world, but maybe the fruits of your creative thoughts are ever so marginally free. It's the one place where the laws of thermodynamics are seriously challenged. And it may turn out, we will find out, there are certainly those who believe that the whole purpose of life could be to overcome the universe's inevitable heat death. Second rule of thermodynamics basically says, the universe is moving towards, lukewarm dispersion of hydrogen atoms. Really? Okay, well, that's kind of bleak. Maybe life can overcome that. Maybe the purpose of life is to overcome the heat death of the universe. That seems very likely, actually, in my estimation. So back to not letting anyone or anything stop you. You remember the thumbnail of this video? I'll just quickly go over to that here to remind you. On being unstoppable. Oh, good, my audio still comes through when I click back. I got one thing right with audio in my streaming videos. So on being unstoppable, I've been working on LXD on WSL, and I'm going to get back to that in this video. After I do this reading, I'm going to switch back to that and try and pick up where I left off. It's not necessarily going to be easy, but I'm going to do it. We don't need this anymore. And from my reinstall of Jupyter, I have to pip install a bunch of stuff. I tried unfreezing it, but my freezing process from earlier isn't actually creating a good requirements.txt file. I'm going to have to rethink that because I have this whole process here that shows me everything that's installed, creates a requirements.txt file so that I can recover from it. So I tried recovering from it, and I am getting errors because I'm not writing it out correctly. So I will be pip installing here and there to get things running, but it's not going to impact this video. Okay. Things go to hell more naturally than they go to heaven, and only all the more so if someone views you as their opponent. If they think there's a zero-sum game going on and your world overlaps their world, yeah, that's not good news. So therefore, the number one priority is to protect the quality of information coming into your system. Lies are profoundly damaging, and like Sherlock Holmes in his bloodhound mode that's often referred to by his documenter, Dr. Watson, you must always be tuned in to the scent of truth. Truth has a smell. If something doesn't smell right, whatever appears to be going on may be a lie, no matter what you're told. So like Holmes, stay relentlessly on the trail and do the right thing. Document everything and explore many avenues. Do not close your mind to any of the possibilities. When anger rears its ugly head, this is often in the Holmes books, as Sherlock Holmes is getting closer to the truth, the bad guys get angry. And when anger rears its ugly head against you, you know you're onto something. Somebody who thinks that they're in a zero-sum game is jealously protecting the truth. And the less secure the truth hider is, the more intense the emotional energies that you will find rallied against you. You're on the right track when they get angry. This is when you can expect to be attacked, and beyond channeling just the unstoppable Sherlock Holmes, right? Let's make sure I went back to the right video source. You're seeing me? No, you're not seeing me. Oh my goodness. All right, I go back to the right video source. That's fine, because I was talking about what was displaying on the screen. So instead of channeling just the unstoppable Sherlock Holmes, you must also now channel the Juggernaut, Professor X's more physically endowed brother from the Marvel Universe, who could give the Incredible Hulk a run for the money. The Juggernaut, as his name implies, is physically unstoppable. He'd pass through a planet if one got in his way. The physical unstoppability of Holmes, the intellectual unstoppability of Holmes, must be backed up by the physical unstoppability of the Juggernaut. Eat well, get enough sleep, and keep yourself hydrated. That's what makes you a physical juggernaut. Now comes a point about subtlety. It's a subtle point and may be implied by the Holmes paragraphs, but more to the point is about application program interfaces, or APIs. In one of the most delightfully ironic and meta lessons of literature, you have to get to the actual 14th and last book of Oz by Baum, L. Frank Baum's last one he wrote, to learn the most important lesson of all about unstoppability. And it's not merely intelligence and strength. There's a bit of faith. In the book of Glinda of Oz, this is where we flip over the list of the Book of Oz. So here's the 14 that are written by L. Frank Baum himself. When you get down to book number 14, it's Glinda of Oz. Dorothy and her companions need to penetrate into the world of the Flatheads and Skeezers in the last unexplored land of Oz, which is that of the Quadlings, to help stop a war. Dorothy and her companions are blocked at the entrance to this distant land by an invisible wall in front of an entrance on a cliff. There seems to be no way through or around it, but it turns out after a full day's walk, if I remember correctly, the wall ends and you can walk right around it. Thus, Dorothy and her companions gain entrance to the land of the Flatheads and the Skeezers. Finding such a solution to a problem is not easy, and you must have both guessed the wall must end in a way that doesn't seal it off by curling around to the cliff, and that you can eventually reach this end if you just invest the time and energy to try. That's the faith part. You have to have enough faith to try, but you must also have enough wisdom to know when to give up. You know, not to mix Dorothy and Alice, but those are the rabbit hole evaluations I always talk about. Let's make sure folks are still with me. This is where I get nervous. I do make mistakes in my live streaming. I'm still early on. Okay, you're coming and going, and I will keep going because I know folks are just arriving to work and they're checking their emails and they're seeing the notifications of me live streaming, and that's when they tend to hop on. So I'm going to have faith. This is my invisible wall. And yeah, we're getting to a few other examples here. You may fail, and the whole day's journey may be for naught. Either the invisible wall ends and you can't go around it, or it doesn't end and you can't go around it. You functionally know one way or the other. If Dorothy was traveling for days to get around the wall, then it's as well as sealed because they would be too late to stop the war. And it's functionally endless, in which case Dorothy must back off and retry. So you must know how much time you're willing to invest in exploring a solution and eliminating possibilities. But the invisible wall wasn't endless or sealed off, and Dorothy got around it. This is where I'm currently at with LXD on WSL2. That's the Linux container system on the Windows subsystem for Linux. And also in other analogous situations in life, invisible walls have been constructed. It's easy to give up. Life and very existence conspires to encourage your giving up. Signals are emitted at you, telling you that you have no other choice than to give up. What if Sherlock Holmes got signals like that? This tells you that you're on to something and that the truth is right around the corner. If you just keep at it like Sherlock Holmes, the Juggernaut, and Dorothy and her companions. This is where we tell the nice people about the timeline of Unix, which is like the invisible wall that by at least 2030 you'll all be getting over. What in the world am I talking about? So Unix was invented 1970. And I'm going to use approximates because, you know, stuff was in progress, you know. And so the first Unix haters, plural possessive, handbook, published approximately 1990. 20 years later. So it took 20 years from the release of something that works like a virus, an operating system that works like a virus, to enough people having been infected by the virus and hating it to actually comment on it in a meaningful published way with a book. They didn't have the internet. I mean, they didn't have the web back then to get the word out about this stuff. So a book was published. And you can find it in pretty easily. Linux Haters Handbook. I don't know if it's plural possessive or what, but no apostrophe at all. There you go. You know, you can drill down on it. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a real thing. But it took 20 years from the release of Unix for the Haters Handbook to come out. Now, Mac, be real specific, Apple, Macintosh computers switched to Unix in 2007. Now, honestly, that's approximately 20 years later from the Unix Haters Handbook being published, right? 1990, 2000, 2010. 2010 would technically have been 20 years later. Now, here we are in 2022, and Microsoft has a, rough Linux support. So say that was 2010, 2020. So this is approximately 10 years later. Approximately 10 years later. So what am I saying, ladies and gentlemen? Over the next 10 years, Windows is going away. You'll all be on Linux. Like it or not, and know it or not. Windows becomes to Microsoft what Cocoa, I believe it's Cocoa like that. It's Apple. It's Mac. Cocoa. I think it's Cocoa. We'll see. Yeah, there it is. Cocoa is Apple's native object-oriented programming interface for its desktop operating system. See, it's desktop operating system. Desktops don't matter. Desktop interfaces, what Cocoa is to Mac. In other words, it doesn't matter if it's Windows, Unix, or Linux underneath, as far as the graphical desktop is concerned. Mac users hardly felt the shift to Unix in 2007 when OS 9 became OS X, right? So same with Windows. My big prediction is that backslashes become forward slashes. In other words, PowerShell and DOS prompts go away. There may still be emulated PowerShell and DOS prompts for compatibility, but the WSL stuff of today goes native, and the Windows stuff of today, becomes the second-class citizens. Of Windows. I mean, we're talking 2030, right? It's 10 more years. It's not really 10 more years. It's we're in 2022, so it's 8 years away. Really not that long. 8 years is going to go like that. All right. So that's my prediction. And that's where I think we are right now with WSL. So what does this mean to you? Get your butts on WSL2 today. You need to learn Linux Terminal. It's the new just plain terminal. It already is on Mac as Unix and will be on Windows by 2030. And this doesn't need to be a bullet point. Yeah. So, learn tech. Learning tech is learning Linux Terminal. If you don't know Linux Terminal, you don't know tech. Sorry, folks. Proprietary's dead. Proprietary's dead, Jim. All right, so that's where I'm trying to take you, and that's why I'm going to be switching to LXD now. So I made great progress on LXD before, and I just really didn't even know it. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is picking up where I left off. Let's see who's there. Yeah, there's people there. There's, you folks can chime in. So I'm going to gather my mind together and get LXD working. It is working. Figure out the API. Go around the invisible wall, right? That's all it is for me at this point. And these parentheses aren't even needed. That's full statements without parentheses. It is working. Figure out the API and go around the invisible wall. So there's some parts to that. Ensure system D is still running. Now there's this last part, which is just my overarching sort of plan of, blowing up on YouTube. I'm always telling people the right directions. And, the YouTube algorithm is rewarding people who are, bombastic hyperbole, boorish behavior, getting up and waving their arms and giving away gifts and doing stupid stunts. The more ridiculous it is, the more the YouTube algorithm plays to it. And that's because of the audience that has traditionally been on YouTube. The more gamer audience, the more internet and web savvy audience, and generally a young kind of gamer leaning crowd. But YouTube is going mainstream and embracing everyone. So the algorithms are going to have to be adapted for that. And so what about those algorithms, and how in the world do I even factor in there? This is views for me in analytics of YouTube going back to May 19th, 2006. So I've been on YouTube since May 19th, 2006. I've been on YouTube very, very small in that time. And somewhere in there, I released HitTail, and you can see these tiny little things wavering there because I have some content. And then in 2011, somewhere around here, to beginning of 2012, I unboxed the Raspberry Pi for the first time. You can see that as the second video here. If I turned off totals, you can see what's attributed to what traffic. So that green is all from the unboxing of the Raspberry Pi, the first on the net to do it, second on the net to do it, really. But you can see my views spiked really high. And if we go back to totals, turn off this one, you can see the other one was for Magic. This line here for Magic. So we just, I guess, turn off everything in order to get. This was doing the thumb trick. This was doing the removable finger trick. And thus, my plans now to overlap the worlds of tech and magic. Tech and magic. It's all tricks. If I were to go into, traffic source, I'm not going to surf around in my analytics, but you would see that there's a lot of young people searching on how to do magic. And I want to lead them along to Linux Terminal, touch typing. I'm going to have to teach them touch typing, because touch typing opens the world of terminal, which opens the world of Vim, right? And thus the new navigational system on my personal website here. Linux tricks, Python tricks, Vim tricks, and Git tricks. And then down here, just magic tricks. So, you know, I'll be blowing up. Don't worry. This looks wonderful on mobile. You know, I got it all covered. You know, don't worry about me. And in fact, how to pronounce my name, an ongoing problem. About MikeLev.in. So first I'm promoting the domain over my actual name instead of doing Mike space Levin there. And then I have the phonetics here. Mike, emphasis, love, in. And I've been experimenting with the idea of the admit one ticket emoji, which would work here, except I don't think people would get the admit one emoji as in, you know, getting in because you have a ticket. So I might keep that part spelled out. But anyway, Mike Levin seems to get the point across. I got a mic. I like to talk. I love to talk into the mic. I love the mic. I'm Mike Levin. I've got some tail. So let's begin. All right. I'm probably too into this kind of stuff for my own good. It's probably not mainstream, but so what? So what? I'm on my way. I got those how many viewers now, you know, go to my channel. 10,800 subscribers. So, you know, I'm on my way. I just need to kind of keep the pressure on and, you know, intelligently organize stuff, do more of these live casts. So let's get to the point. I've got to make sure that systemd is still running. And it's completely safe for me to search in this journal, my already public journal, systemd. And I know that there's a command sitting around here. To check if systemd is running. There it is. Yeah, who would have figured? PS-no header 0,1. I'm going to put that in my alias because it's going to be something I'm going to need to do enough. So I open a terminal. This puts me into this is Ubuntu 18.04 under the Windows subsystem for Linux. In my full screen focused mode, tabs are turned off. You know, the toolbar down here is not showing. And I'm already in a virtual env for Python that puts me in Python 3.10. And then I put myself into the GitHub directory. And all that is accomplished through Profile. No, all that is accomplished. Yeah, that's right, through Profile. My .bash profile, bash underscore profile file is what gets run every time a new terminal is opened. And so here's the source activate, my virtual env for Python. And now I'm going to be checking whether systemd is running enough. You can see I already have a systemd command, which drops me into the folder location where we put daemons. Those daemons I referred to live inside of here. So you're all, if you follow along with me, are going to get to know the /etc/systemd/system directory a lot. But I need another alias to see whether systemd is running. And I need to decide whether I'm going to use systemd as the alias or not. Probably not. LXD check. LXD. Will I remember it? Will I even remember it? You know, system. So before I do this, I'm going to open even another terminal and type system. See, it's not found. Did I mean system is right? So I'm going to use system. What system is running? So it's not predisposed towards systemd equals, and then that command I just put in my copy buffer, which I just lost because I highlighted in there, but that's over in my journal, no big deal. I re-highlight it here. Remember, highlighting is copying. It's life-changing, folks. If you don't make just highlighting in a terminal copying, you're missing out. So now I save and quit. Now I exit because it's not active yet, and I just open it again, and then I just type system, and it echoes back systemd. So I know systemd is running. The command I am actually executing happens to be this. It would have had the same result as typing that. It shows me systemd is running. It might not be running under WSL2. It doesn't by default. I had to get systemd to be running under WSL2. That's just so important. I'm going to document these things much better later, but ensure systemd is still running. That's this command here, which I'll indent. All right, and document later more cleanly how I got systemd running under WSL2, because it's important. It won't work without it. All right, so now there's just the LXD command. I already have them set up, so I need to figure out how to list my installed LSD, figure out how to list my LXD inventory of containers. I believe I made 2. And it's probably going to be down near where I talk about it, so I could hunt for it. Someone asked me in a prior video how I find stuff from before. Now the idea is I don't really need to find it from before. I just know it better. So instead of looking for it in my journal, because I took the notes earlier, I know that by going over to Google and just Control-T for another tab and go list LXD, that's the concept. I'm listing my LXDs. List running containers. It's not even running containers. I'll go into getting started. Find the word list, right? It's as obvious as it seems. Enter the following command to list all instances. Manage instances. We want to make sure that it's actually running. It might not be running. Launch a container. Launch an instance, right? So this is so important, right? This is Linux containers. And for people following along, you will remember that I was mistakenly under the impression that LXD was a technology from the Linux authorities. Who are the Linux authorities? Who's the governing body over Linux? Linux Foundation. So you can Google Linux Foundation, and there's ads there, of course, but then you can go to Linux Foundation. These are the people where you'll find all the governance, right? There's going to be people talked about. There's the board of directors. You would think Linus would be on here, but I guess he's, you know, kind of like benevolent dictator for life, right? But this is where all the important stuff is about what standard core Linux really is. And the thing that sent me on the wrong track is the KVM. Everyone should understand that when I talk about hypervisor on the Windows side, I'm also talking about KVM, the kernel-based virtual machine on the Linux side. Linux has KVM, and Microsoft, Intel has hypervisor. They all kind of use the same thing because that technology needs to be built in at the chip level. See, the first thing they do is they talk about Intel and they talk about AMD because it needs to be built into the chip. It needs to be supported from the hardware level. And then there's a software interface to get to that special virtual machine features. These virtual machine features happen to be reused for the container features, but in a more efficient way that Docker used to do and went away from, but LXD still does. So when you look into the fact that this is built in at the kernel level, see, it goes into how to. What I'm really interested in is, how official this is, how deeply embedded into the standard kernel it really is. And it doesn't talk a lot about it. And I only even bring this up because when we go over to this one where we learn all about LXD, one can never, keep in mind enough that it's coming from the Microsoft camp. Project sponsored by Canonical. Canonical makes Ubuntu. Okay. Understand where LXD comes from. In spirit, it's like KVM, kernel-based virtual machine, but containers. It is sponsored by Canonical. Canonical makes Ubuntu. Microsoft chose Ubuntu as their standard, parentheses Canonical. Do you understand how funny all this stuff is? Oh my God. Default Linux of WSL. All right. So that's where all this is coming from, and it might be stated it's not yet as official as KVM, but is the logical choice, parentheses over Docker. You might not think so based on how popular Docker is, but trust me, no one's going to include Docker in with standard Linux because of this weird compositing system it uses, and how difficult it is to get what most people want, which is just virtual machines, but containers. It's just like virtual machine, but it's a container. And you can do all the system stuff. You can, apt install things, and it gets kept. You can apt install, and the next time you restart that container, that apt installed thing is still there. It's like doing a pip install under virtual envs. It's the same thing. We're getting Python-like virtual envs, but with whole Linux systems, so that when you apt install, it's persistent, it's system-based. It's not app-based in these app directories. It's system-based, running all through /user bin and all that stuff, as opposed to, well, anyway, you get the idea. It's totally different and much easier and much more logical than Docker. All right, so these commands. I do a lot of talking and I don't really get to it, but I'm going to test LXD list, right? Oh, the commands look like LXC, right? The commands are split between LXD and LXC. Are they all LXC? No. Creating it in the first place is LXD. And we already did this sudo LXD init. That's done on my system. We went through that little wizard before. So for those who are just joining in now, I already did LXD, sudo LXD init. It walked me through a little wizard. I already did the creating of images. And so now I should be able to just list them, LXC list. And there they are, running. Oh my goodness, running. For all these days, they've been running, and I didn't even know they were running. Let's see if I can stop one. I don't want Accurate Gecko. I want this one here. Can you believe that? I didn't have any system degradation that you would have with virtual machines. So you must understand that picture I drew a few days ago. Where's that? I can probably show you that because it's so important to the concept, right? It's always okay to have another virtual desktop, although we can't bring it over. So I have habits I can't help. I'm trying to keep the broadcasting software on the last screen. But now I can at least go Windows E key and then go into my images directory of my public site. And now I can just step through the different pictures. Oh, I can't use forward back arrows? How lame. Not having LXD under WSL2 is unthinkable, right? So this stuff here, I actually have too. This is the exact scenario that's going on. I have 2 of these running, and for days that's been happening, and I haven't felt any system degradation performance. That's the efficiency of these types of things. So let's see if any of you are talking. Let's see if any of you are even there. Yeah, you're following along, right? There's some people there. This is interesting. This is fun. This is the most important thing right now there is on being, people talk about it being a developer. I really have to state emphatically, this is not being a developer. This is just being tech literate. I already told you about my YouTube stuff. That doesn't matter anymore. This is about literacy. Some might say technology literacy, but I say just plain literacy. Reading, writing, and as they say, arithmetic. I'm not above relying on the spell checker. The 3 R's. Of course, there's more. There's history. So there's always more. But, you know, there's a turbo first word. Is it computer? Computer? Tech? Nix? Literacy is just literacy. It's like one of the 3 R's. That's because Unix/Linux won. By 2030, you'll all know. And accept it. And it won't even be an issue. It'll be like it was always that way. And, you know, it'll be like it's an end of thought, right? The fact I'm, you know, promoting it to you now, the fact I'm telling you the writing's on the wall and you can have strategic advantages by, you know, shifting now. You get advantages in life by switching now, because even though Windows will be Linux based by 2030, it's still all about GUI tools, graphical user interface, and dependencies. It's all about dependencies on proprietary, graphical user interfaces, even if the underlying stuff is now generic tech. And what I'm saying, if you know, sorry about this, you can play it at 2 times speed. If you know the generic tech, you're more powerful than those who rely on the often disrupted forced upgrades, etc. GUI tools, power tools, GUI tools. Because the text tools are powerful too. Tell me Vim isn't a power tool. Anywho, so we have listed our running ones, and so now back to the documentation here from from Canonical, right? Honestly, it's honestly Canonical. So we can list them. Now we need to be able to start and stop ones, right? So there's start instance name and then there's stop instance name. Let's try. And so it makes sense. The API, the invisible wall I've had so much difficulty walking around is this, LXC. So it's LXD to get the whole thing going. You know, you're not seeing it here, but LXD init, and that had to be done with a sudo. And that sets up things in the background. That runs daemons, not dudo, but sudo. Sudo LXD init. That kicks off a wizard. The wizard gets stuff running so long as systemd is running on your system. It won't work if you don't have systemd running on your system, which is the big initial showstopper here. I can't tell you how much of a showstopper that was. LXD, and now you have LXC as your everyday command. LXC list, LXC stop, accurate gecko. I love the name. And now we do LXD list again, and there's one that's running, and there's one that's stopped. Now, I need to get into the one that's running. I might even want to delete the one that stopped. I'm telling you that, you know, you can just do them like this, create them, throw them away. It's just like commands. These are the commands now. This is pulling it all together, folks. This is making it work. The dream, such as it were. Is there anybody out there? Maybe you're typing to me and I don't even know. Or you're just following along. That's fine. Follow along. Okay. Think. Delete an instance. LXD delete. Let's get rid of that. Accurate gecko. LXC delete. Accurate gecko. It is that easy. LXC list. Now we've got this one running. Isn't this amazing, right? So now we just need to be able to get into it. How do you get into it? Now this is where I got confused last time. I used the password foo because I don't want to ever be blocked by the password. C instance configuration, instance properties, instance options, instance devices. Update configuration at runtime. Memory limits. Device access. You can have shared devices. So if you actually want to do stuff where your data is coming to one of your Windows mounted locations, it's probably going to be /mnt. You know, it probably is going to have a fairly simple way to put your data outside the LXD container. So when you're doing this sort of stuff, if you're reading and writing to a data file, you can have that data on, say, like a normal Windows thing here. Windows can have a folder. And then the LXD containers can read and write to that folder so that when you nuke this, boom, your data is still there. Lovely, right? All this is such a lovely image. Profiles. Profile store configuration options. See, so to me, getting into all these profiles, okay, it's YAML files that do all the configuration. So all the things about your drive, about your LXD container, can be kept in a YAML file. It's network interfaces and, you know, it's shared drives and stuff. So that's all good. That's well and good. But honestly, I'm anxious to just get into the thing and, you know, assure myself it's a running instance of Linux. Apply a profile to an instance. You can also specify profiles when launching. So it's launched, it's running. So you can run commands from an instance, right? So you can run a single command from the terminal of the host machine. The host machine in this case is this. When they talk about a host machine, it's no longer the Windows host it's talking about. Because systemd is running, purple, because this is Magic Transitions. This is the host. That's not bright enough. This is the host. This is the host to LXD. So from one of my normal terminals, like the ones we're really in right now, because it's I'm not into a sub-terminal yet, I can issue commands on that instance of Ubuntu. I can do updates from the outside. Okay, get shell access. Here we are. The following instructions assume that your container has the bin bash command. If it doesn't, change the command appropriately. I see no reason why I shouldn't have the bin bash command. That's when I talk about bash shells as a flavor of Unix shell. That is the that's that. Okay. LXC execute instance name bin bash. Oh, this is it. This is it. This is the login. By default, you are logged in as root user. If you want to log in as a different user, enter the following command. Oh, bin bash gives you the bin bash. I get it. I get it. All right. This was what I wasn't getting before. So it's LXC space exec, the instance name, space 2 minuses space bin bash. We can handle that. So I'll copy the whole thing, and then I'll just, arrow key and backspace to change this instance name, right? So this instance name is U1804. Now watch my path. This path here is very, very tied to my current bash terminal session, right? So when you change that, the prompt changes. There's going to be a new system for generating the prompt. We're going to be root. So this $sign is going to be replaced by a checker, a tic-tac-toe, hash symbol. There it is. We're inside that machine. I can clear it. I can do ls. There's nothing there. We're in the home of root. So I can cd to the root of root, do an ls, and we see all the very traditional directory locations, much more traditional than what you see Linux terminal side. So I guess we can compare this. This is being logged in to my LXD. This is mission accomplished, right? I can log in as a different user. I forget what user I set up. It's either going to be HealUs or Ubuntu. But I should be able to exit, right? Get back out of it, and now I can get back into it. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. The command is this. And this is success for the video, honestly. It belongs up here. Figure out the commands to log into an LXD session, a running LXD session. Bam, that's the command to log into a running LXD session. Now let's try logging in as a different user so that we're not super user. It said on the documentation to use this one here. And it either inherited it from my parent machine, HealUs, or it hasn't even been set up yet, which is a real possibility. So this one is going to be U1804, just like above it. But now this one here I'm going to guess it tried to make a user based on my parent. Nah, no entry for that. The other big one that is used in these cases is Ubuntu. Oh, look at that. There is a Ubuntu user that sets up a default Ubuntu user. There it is. So I don't think I asked for that. I forget exactly. We can create another instance and I can switch between it and another one. So I'll keep myself logged in here like that. Clear. We're going to make a new LXD instance. And this is the magic now. If people stuck with me this long, this is where you start to see the wonderful magic. And I will start to understand how much memory is used, where the files are put, all that kind of stuff. Configure instances. Delete an instance. Start and stop. Show information about an instance. List instances, manage instances. Here, let's go. We got to launch a virtual machine, launch a container, launch an instance, virtual machines, containers, top of file. So there's got to be a create virtual machine, create container, right? It's going to be one of these near the top. Enter the following command to launch a container. Is launching a container the same as creating a container? I'm going to search in my documentation because I know that the command has the name of the instance in it, right? Which is user lost in my virtual desktops, which is this U1804 will have been in the command I use. So I just search in Vim for U1804. It's not going to be in too many places. Is it only in this one place? Had I not copied in my journal the command to create that that instance? Yeah, maybe not. LXC launch. And so they're giving examples. Image, colon, Ubuntu slash, and then the name of the container. I bet this is it. The terminology launch, it means create a new one. So that must be the user. Colon Ubuntu slash. No, that's from some sort of inventory of I guess, template images. So what we're going to do is try that. Try that from, not inside here. I can't do it from inside. There's nested issues. But from here, I should be able to do LXD launch, and this is probably a sudo command. LXC launch. Images Ubuntu 18.04. And then the syntax says space the name of it. Space U2. Creating U2. Oh, look, see? Retrieving image. It's probably doing it off the net. I wonder. I wonder how cloud, bound this is. Leave it to Canonical to make it cloud-based and not derived from your current parent instance. But okay. There's probably different ways. There's image servers and stuff. So we're probably doing something here that implies it's fetching it from Canonical. It's definitely something to keep aware of. But now we can do LXC list, and we've got U2 running there. And we can log into that side by side from this other one in this other terminal. Oh, where I did the list. That's actually where we would do it. So we do this same command where we log in. LXC exec U2 -su -login Ubuntu. So I can pick this command up. It's very similar to that. Paste that over here, but this becomes just U2. And I'm not even using sudo. That's very interesting. You don't need to be a super user. Oh, well, I am doing a super user to log in. That's a command being executed on the remote machine. So it's saying on this instance, on this U2 instance, as super user, log in as user Ubuntu. To run a command as administrator, use sudo. Did I not do that? Oh, no, I'm in. I am in. That's in. Oh my goodness. Let's check our network connectivity, just update stuff on it. Sudo apt update. This will update the repo. It's got internet. Look at that. So it's going through the bridge or whatever. Sudo apt. Oh, failed to download some. They have been ignored or old ones instead. That's okay. Sudo apt update. Okay, failed to fetch. All right, so let's see. Ping, I don't know. www.amazon.com. Can we ping Amazon? Name resolution, so we might not have DNS. See if Vim is here. I got Vim. What other network stuff can we test? ipconfig. Trace route. Linux tests if I have internet. Ping was my first thought, and I pinged Amazon. They're saying ping Google. Yeah, name resolution, so it's DNS problems. So I got to figure out the network stack stuff. It's all that configuration stuff, and I don't need to do that while I've got you on the video here. But I have had great success. I actually have this picture now going successfully. I'm doing this stuff. I have this. I created two, just like I talked about. And they've been running for days without them consuming any system resources. And I know the API to start and stop them. I can get around the invisible wall. I can exit out of them here. LXC list. It's a real simple API. LXC U2 stop. LXC stop U2. LXC list. There it is, stopped, right? I've done it. I've done it. This is everything I have set out to accomplish. And my next step is going to be figuring out how to configure these things to have a correct network bridge. There's a lot of ways to go around it. There's having its own virtual LAN, but I already have a virtual LAN. So this one here creates its own virtual LAN. And there's no reason that these can't all be on its virtual LAN, just being different IPs accessible and using the same, there's network application translation protocols that are set up to this machine in particular. So there might have to be special NAT rules. Yeah, I got to figure that out. There's stuff I need to figure out, but the big challenges are in fact overcome, and that's a huge success. So if you want to keep me talking, send some text to me. I'm going to close out of this and opening it again over there to see if people are trying to type to me and something. Oh, look at that. You guys have been typing. Similarly accessible bindings. I got some catching up to do here. Sorry about that. I didn't see you guys typing, but this is great. I'll engage with you folks, talk about what I've done so far, and then see where to go. Running Linux on X230T. I have similarly accessible bindings for screen captures, edit capture, etc. Does Mac OS X lack these bare bones features? I use Deepin Screenshot and Kira or GIMP. Yeah, so it can be gotten working, but you know, the work it takes to get it working, switching between different hardware and stuff. I mean, I'd like to see you do all the features of like supporting a stylus like this. It's not just screen capture. This is screen capture by double clicking the eraser. Now it's having the freeform drawing on the screen. And that freeform drawing having flipping around the stylus and erasing portions of it. And, you know, the different buttons on the stylus being supported. Honestly, I know the arguments that driver support is coming in place. And it will gradually come in place. Now that Microsoft is paying Canonical to maintain Ubuntu, there's going to be a lot of increased driver supports for special cases. But we're early in the stages, and my goal is, in fact, to get off of Windows. There's no doubt about it. It's all about getting off of Windows in time. It's just not time yet for me. For others who have made the switch, more power to you, AZ. I admire that. I don't have the courage for it yet myself. Imperfect human being. I'm staying compatible with the office where I work, my day job. And yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be on Windows still. And Ben, yeah, Windows will be just a desktop like XFCE for sure. Oh, he's saying that from a computer science standpoint, PowerShell is an order of magnitude better technology than Bash. Well, better is a relative word. If you want stuff that is solid and can be embedded into drones and has a light footprint and has been banged on for 40 years, you want Bash. If you want an overweight, you know, attempt to be like Linux and Unix, but incomplete in its implementation, still using backslashes, going out of its way to do color coding and provide a coddling user experience as a consolation prize that you can't actually be on Unix or Linux, then PowerShell is fine. A lot of people who have been forced to make that transition to stay on Windows, but doing Unix-like system administration, have come to love PowerShell. It coddles you just like Microsoft software coddles you. It's the same love you're going to find for VS Code. PowerShell is open source, right? PowerShell is cross-platform, right? Why couldn't PowerShell under Linux become the new default shell? Maybe, I don't know. Is PowerShell really open source? I would look into that. It's certainly strongly associated with Microsoft. It's probably open source in the same way VS Code is open source. PowerShell for every system on GitHub, yeah. So it's off the beaten track, right? So a lot of technologies you adopt not because they're best, but because they're here. I knew people must have been typing to me. Sorry about not seeing that. That must have been so frustrating. It's another thing to keep on top of. If this is literacy, I'm illiterate. No, Ben, you'll be able to pick it up. PowerShell and Unix terminal are not that different from each other. And honestly, Unix terminal is CD, LS, PWD. It's not really that much. All this LXD stuff I'm doing is just to get different Linux terminals, Unix terminals under a different context. There's, the ability to navigate through a Linux and Unix terminal to run software is fundamental. The ability to automate things, it's not that difficult. I know from the technology you talk about. I know you're very much a Microsoft shop sort of person, but from the technology you talk about, especially your Emacs and stuff, someone who does Emacs and Scheme, you are not illiterate. You have the most badass part of the technology stuff, right? So, I talk about this as being the place to live in the middle here. This is Vim. This is what humans can do. What most people can do. You, my friend, Ben, Celtic Orthodox Prayer, live out here in the edge with Emacs and Lisp. This is special wizards here. Your wizarding hat is very different. Your magic wands and the spells you can cast are, very much more powerful than the stuff that's in here. These are lesser wizards. As powerful as I talk about it being, they're kind of like they're the carpenters. There's a saw and a hammer. The lesser wizards are more like carpenters, and that's things like, well, they all use Linux terminal. Honestly, Linux terminal goes across the entire thing. It's just a fact. All that Microsoft proprietary PowerShell and DOS prompt, they're going to become the second-class citizens. No one wants backslashes in their life. Technology has settled on the Unix and the Linux shell. All tools, all machine learning stack stuff is released on Linux first. So, I'm not saying it's inferior tech. Lots of superior tech has lost. Lots of superior tech has not been what has, taken over the system like a virus in time. Yeah, Zali hates Linux and open source, but is a big Emacs guru. That's an interesting hybrid, right? Yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense because Emacs and Lisp come from a different lineage. They come from the incompatible timeshare system. You should tell your friend Zali, if he's a purist, he should be running Emacs and Lisp not on Windows, but on Lisp hardware. He should get his hands on like an old Apollo box or something. Microsoft has lost in Linux, and yeah. Does most of his stuff in DOS box. I really know Bash better than PowerShell. On Windows, I use Emacs eShell. Yeah. So, I mean, Ben, you're talking about all the right issues. So it's not like I'm saying edge case stuff goes away. I'm just talking about what becomes the new center line. Going back to this drawing again, you know, it's so easy to make different variations on that. The question is, you know, what lives in that center? It's always a question of, when you draw the lines in to get the 80-20 rule, it's based on reality. If it was what people liked or preferred, things like the Amiga would be in here, things like BOS and all kinds of lovely stuff that people like to use. But this is the compromised. This is the compromise. It is the compromise. What it is not is the Amiga B, Plan 9. You know, there's just so much stuff out here, you know, CPM. There's so much stuff that lost. Temple OS, someone asked me, what do I think about Temple? So, like, honestly, in spirit, it's the spirit. Unix, just one, so big, it's not even funny. Now, in actual practice, it's Linux. Because footprint-wise, reality-wise, the footprint of Unix is some proprietary things out there, plus Mac. And Linux is Windows. So as far as the big footprint is concerned, Windows and Linux is the big footprint. Now, there's another story here, you know. Everybody's running Minix. Everybody's running Minix. You don't know it, but you're running Unix on your machine right now. But I keep putting that off because that's going to have to be another video. It's just too much to talk about. Yeah. All right. Yeah, there's a lot of people here. It's up to 18 views, 2 concurrent views. I've made some mistakes with audio early on again. I got to get those mistakes out of my process. But I'm thinking what else to say. I've actually got time this morning. It's 10:30. I went till about 11 o'clock yesterday. So remaining things, remaining challenges. Configuring network for LXD instances. Okay, and under that I need to, you know, sudo apt get and update successfully. You know, that's a system update. And understand the network context. And it's a VLAN, really. Virtual LAN. Understand the virtual LAN networking context. Choices. Choices and context. Because it's not going to be just one thing. These are going to be able to be things I can configure. You know, you don't want a spaghetti tangle of virtual networks. That's actually something that could happen a little bit too easily. So you've got your physical network. So your internet drop is coming into you by your cable modem or whatever. So that's going into a router. And then the router creates a network that the router itself is on. And that's your real network. Now, I could subdivide it more, but most of the time it's not subdividing it. And then there's some things, there's going to be something out here that works like a server that's really tied very closely to your router that handles DNS, dynamic name serving. So there's always going to be a DNS thing. And then new machines that come onto the network, new machines in your house that come onto the network, are going to be dynamically assigned an IP. IP1, IP2, and so on. And, you know, so these are all on the same subnet. This is a local area network. There's a range of IPs, usually private internal IPs. These are not internet IPs. The only internet IP here is belonging to the router. There's a real net IP. That net IP, where you think, oh, what's my IP? Honestly, that public IP is only belonging to this router. It might be made to look like it belongs to one of these, but that's because of some translation stuff going on. But these get private IPs. In fact, these are known ranges. Whenever you get your own machine's IP, you're going to be on a private IP range. Easy to Google up. This is known stuff. You don't even have to drill down on it. It usually starts with 192 or 172. These are private ones, 10 dot. So they're put aside in the number space for private use. Now, what happens when you run WSL? One of these blue boxes, you know, we can draw it very big, and you know, there's part of it which is Windows. And now there's another part of it inside of it, which is another LAN. See, this is a local area network. And your other blue box is inside a virtual LAN, and it has its own, you know, I can draw in white first because it's going to have its own DNS server in there. It's a different range of IPs. Has its own DNS server, and then any new box that comes up here has its own new set of IP1, IP2. And the people who innovated this, the place where it became really popular was QEMU. QEMU, the unsung hero of all this stuff. QEMU, which is still part of the Android development chain. And QEMU innovated this whole nested virtual LAN stuff. Now, as you might imagine, what you're trying to avoid here is, see, I use my back eraser for all you folks who are like, oh, well, I have driver support. Yeah, let's get that driver support on your Linux desktop. What we're trying to avoid here is yet another big blue like that with yet another virtual LAN inside of it, right? You can imagine the nestedness, the crazy nestedness that might occur with yet another, a third DNS server. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. And you know, I'm eliminating all this stuff in here. There's no reason to have another level of nesting. Anything that's created by LXD here should just look like another box out here, right? So hope that's clear. Fun fact, Plan 9 was created by the creators of Unix in the mid-90s. Bell Labs attempted to revive Plan 9 with an OS name in Inferno. Was going to take the world by storm, but never did. Thank you, Scott M. Your feedback lately has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed your feedback, Scott M. So yeah, I'm going to do a little, you know, Plan 9 search here. there's always something that's better. Honestly better. This is actually from the people who created Plan 9 from Outer Space. Different thing. Plan 9 OS. I think they put it with a slash after the 9 from Bell Lab. I got to read about this myself. I want to catch up a little bit more. But, you know, Plan 9 is Unix perfected. See, it's Unix-like, right? So they're not saying that there's something just outright better than Unix. They're saying, oh, we're going to make another thing that's Unix-like, but we're going to fix all our mistakes having to do with, you know, drivers and permissions. Permissions is a big deal, the permission scenario, because all this stuff, just like how Windows 95 was made before, you know, the big security lockdown, and then Windows NT kind of replaced Windows 95 as the underlying better tech. That never happened so much with Linux, and Plan 9 could have been that. You wouldn't even know the difference. You'd probably be using it a lot like you were using Unix, in fact, but just all the rough edges were improved and smoothed out. I'll be able to say more intelligent stuff about that later. These names are wonderful. So Ken Thompson and Rob Pike, they're the creators of the Google Go language, right? So Google, the Google Go language, which is what most of Google's systems are programmed in now instead of C and instead of Python, right? They phased out C and Python in favor of stuff written in the Go language, which was by these two folks, some of the original creators of Unix, file system stuff and OS stuff. So anyway, keep me on this roll. I'll keep talking as long as you have feedback. Acme text editor, colors as my Emacs theme, as a home page. Yeah. So, you know, the joke, I always try and quote this joke. I don't even know if I have it right, but, you know, VI is a fine editor and Emacs is a fine OS. Let's see if the real joke comes up. Yeah, this is on Hacker News. So there's people disagreeing, you know, anytime you post stuff like this, you're going to have debate. But, you know, the joke goes, Emacs is a great operating system, lacking only a decent editor. Because, right, the first thing you do when you use Emacs as your text editor is you have to customize it. You have to add stuff. So like Lisp itself, like the language it's so connected to, they're very reductionist, small building parts. And if you want larger parts built out of it, you got to build it up. So the idea is it's a great operating system lacking only a decent editor. And Vim is a great editor, utterly lacking a decent window manager. Okay, I've heard different versions of the joke. Oldest software rivalry, right? VI versus Emacs is the split. If I haven't talked about it enough, there's two types of vibe energies in the world, all right? And I'm even going to change my brush style to demonstrate this. I think a nice pastel would get this across. That's a glitter tube. I want pastels. Yeah, that's a pastel. So blue pastel is going to get across the idea of fuzzy blue. Blue and fuzzy, earth tones, chaotic. This is a vibe of energy. Does it look familiar? It should. It's water in the planet Earth and soft. Okay, and then we change to another brush type. We put the glue on directly from the tube because it's very physical in its nature. And it's very linear. This is the other kind of energy. And you might recognize this. Oh, I don't know how you might recognize this. But, you know, it is very linear and solid in nature. It's often shiny, you know, with a light source. And these are the two vibes of energy. I always talk about it. And I find it to be very real and very reflected in things in life. Things are either going to be soft and blue or hard and green. And these things, align. There's VI, parenthesis M, and Zmax. Right? And so they're very different vibes. This is able to be configured, highly configurable. You have to do stuff to it before it's useful to you. The hunter-gatherers, not the hunter-gatherers, but the gatherers are associated with this. Gather and marshal. And conversely, I should get the color picker. I know that's the color picker there now somewhere. But conversely, this is hunting. And I shouldn't use that soft thing. It should look more like the toothpaste tube. And this is also like compete. Competition is over there, and marshaling your forces is over there. I don't know if it's one or two L's, but you get the idea. And this is the split in vibes. This is yin and yang. One contains a bit of the other. I certainly don't want to mess up such a good drawing with accidentally just ruining it with stuff. So I'll do this in a layer with pencil, but you get the idea. This is where that duality and balance come from. One has a little bit of the other inside of it all the time. There. That kind of does it, I suppose. You get it. Quite a bit. Scott M. worked for AT&T and Bell Labs for over 20 years. Man, someone who was at the mothership. Over that time, I saw so many innovations at the Murray Hill location. I struggle to remember that name, but yeah, Murray Hill is where Unix was born. And so many other technologies. It was one of the fantasy lands of, when pure research mattered and information technology was invented, and, so much different from today, where that's all been driven out from commercial industry into universities, if you're lucky, into universities. Museum showcasing all that innovation. Always got a kick out of a digital counter that they had on display, counting the number of patents the company had acquired. And and then Ben is saying, to me, this is similar to classical versus Baroque or classical versus romantic. It's absolutely true. These concepts reoccur everywhere. I am not advocating Asian Taoism, although that's where a lot of this originates from, in balance. I am not advocating the sci-fi theme of chaos versus order versus chaos. Hinduism has a lot of this blended into it. Shintoism, I believe, this is everywhere. This is hard and soft in martial arts. It's everywhere and it's everything. It is not a particular philosophy. It's just the reality of life. There are things that are soft and blue in our world. There's a lot of things that are soft and blue and stormy and require invention to be put to use, that require innovation before they
can add value to your life. And then there's things that are green and linear and shiny that you can just pick up and start using as a tool, like breaking a branch off of a tree itself. It has all the carbon built up into it, ready to burn. You can't burn water, but you can boil water and hard boil eggs in it. So, these are just channeling of life experiences that have been wrapped and rewrapped into philosophical and religious systems of our world for countless. But, things align to them. Emacs aligns to the water, and Vim aligns to the tree branch. They also showcased the 9 Nobel Prizes, 5 Turing Awards, 5 Emmys, and a Grammy. Yeah. So Scott M sounds like a really interesting person. He was at the heart of it. I yearn back to my days at Commodore, where I almost ran into the innovators of the industry, like Jack Tramiel and Jay Miner. However, the people who really did it, the people who changed our world in the big ways, were at Bell Labs at Murray Hill and a handful of other places like it. MIT is one of them. The 2 big camps, the 2 big bizarro alternative technology histories. The C branch that became us came from Bell Labs and Murray Hill. And then the Lisp and Emacs branch that, never will die, but certainly did not become the center line of the average distribution curve, right? The Lisp and Emacs will always be with us. They just didn't become that center line of that curve. And those came from MIT. So spiritually, those are the 2 big alignments. A lot of others come into the picture. Xerox, any place that has skunkworks nowadays. There's a lot of this pure R&D stuff going on there. But Bell Labs is, shaped our world, shaped our modern tech, no doubt, in countless ways that reverberate through our daily lives. So it's pretty exciting to have someone in the audience who worked there for 20 years. Keep tuning in. I'm going to be doing this stuff a lot now, and I love to have the feedback from someone who was there. You must have such stories and recollections and important contributions to make. Scott, I noticed that you did one comment on my videos, and commenting here in chat is wonderful. But anytime anyone wants to go back to my site, which is really coming together now, feel free to do that. It's very appreciated. I'm going to try and do my best to blow up and do a little bit of good for the world. I'm just starting to get my site together, and some of the stuff I'm going to do is flesh this out so that I can draw people along from learning about general magic tricks. I'll get all my magic tricks in there, and then try and move them along to Linux tricks and Python tricks and Vim tricks and Git tricks, and just give people that literacy experience that I think is necessary for tomorrow's youth, if not today's. And of course, the concept of the ikigai, not ikigai, ikagai. I got to get IKIGAI. I'm going to layer in this concept here because it's so very important. Almost everything I'm doing now is the fact that there's a worthy thing here. I missed being a scientist. I missed being someone who can actually be the kind of person from Bell Labs that I admire most, the Ken Thompsons of the world. The Fernando Corbatos of the world, who innovated time-sharing. In a lot of ways, it's the unacknowledged people, the people who invented data piping concepts. But in my own humble way, what I need to do is what the world needs on that right-hand portion, helping people get that, literacy portion down. If you want to be a powerful citizen and you don't want to have to retrain yourself constantly. There's constant retraining, disruption. That the Unix way, the ways that they got down so right, like, people might argue PowerShell versus Bash shell. None of that matters. What you really want, and in fact, Plan 9 is fine. What you really want is the concepts that are reflected in the Unix way. This is what doesn't go obsolete, the Unix philosophy. All right, so Unix philosophy is a set of cultural norms and philosophical approaches. Right? Unix? Wait, what are you talking about? Yeah, Unix is cultural norms. Unix is philosophical approaches to minimalist software development. It's based on experience. It's based on the learned experience, of all these Bell Labs people. And they were the ones doing it. Information science was invented there. We take information science for granted, like it's something we've always known. And I really have to get that guy's name down. Sean something, invented by... These are even other people before the one I'm thinking about. Fathers of information. I got a lot of learning. I know less. I know way less than I know. Oh, what language was Multics written in? Yeah, I don't even know. I'll check it out. PLI, IBM technology. Wonder how much the success of Unix was due to the C language versus PLI. First, I got to understand PLI, IBM technology. Yeah, not enough pure research going. Scott M says not enough pure research going on these days. Companies are only looking for the quarterly profits. And in his humble opinion, the government has to incentivize companies for doing research and manufacturing. Yeah, they absolutely do. All the big breakthroughs, I'm not even going to get started on anti-gravity. Between the Lorentz forces and the Casimir forces, we've known enough to do anti-gravity propulsion systems since quantum mechanics was formulated in the 50s. Not doing it is a matter of lack of will, period. We know it's possible. Quantum phase locking is done every day today. If you haven't seen this, this is like so yesterday, it's not even funny. Oh, I don't want to run the YouTube videos and demonetize, but you should see how, the interaction between superconductors and magnetic fields locks things in place, in absolute positions relative to each other, angles and stuff. So you pick up one and the other moves phase locked with it. And the fact that, you can magnetize the polar, the quantum foam means at least one form of anti-gravity is like success assured. It's just a matter of ramping up energy enough to create a magnetic field in emptiness. So there's just so much lacking of will of pure research. It's willpower or incentivizing, right? Government needs to incentivize the big projects. Yeah, all right. So let's see what else I can ramble on about. Don't go on to the paranoid stuff. So The Information was a book that I read that really introduced me to the work of this particular scientist that I think was was Bell Labs. No, I'm not going to go through the brain fart. I'll just carry on with closing tabs and trying to remember where I was at, and then I'll check on your comments there. So the Unix philosophy is a thing, and it resulted in a number of things about the operating system that are timeless concepts. Everything is a file, right? Everything is a file. Describes one of the defining features of Unix and its derivatives, right? A wide range of input-output resources. That everything is a file that you can read and write from. And so there is the consistency of the API. The consistency of the API is very important. Reading and writing files, that means that all that stuff with, open as, that manifests under Python with certain language, but it's standard. You can write one interface, and that interface, you already know how to read and write to most things, which could include outputting to a printer, displaying something on a computer monitor, sending something over a network. It's all a file. And hand in hand with everything as a file is data piping. Now, we're going to find modern data pipeline, which is a problem, but data piping in Unix, it's not that it's a problem, it's that we have to differentiate that a Unix data piping is, while it has similarities to the concept of data pipelines that dominate search results so much, it's a little bit different. The concept of pipelines was championed by Douglas McIlroy at Unix's ancestral home, Bell Labs. There it is again. So these are the things that go into that, shaping of the Unix way. And here's the toolbox philosophy, yet another concept. Unix philosophy is the toolbox. It's a page we were already at. But you get the idea. These are things that are kind of contrary to Microsoft. It's contrary to what Macintosh was before it came around to being based on Unix. And it's not the graphical user interface stuff. It's just not the GUI stuff. All this GUI stuff is of no consequence. It will run with any backend. Any backend can be wired to the GUI stuff. That's why the web browser was such a threat to Microsoft, because Sun was running around saying, the network is the computer. So Sun was saying, the network is the computer. You can see every time I pull these up, I Instapaper it so I can double check my facts later. But, a particular person, John Gage from Sun Microsystems, says the network is the computer. And then along comes Netscape. Going, yeah, you're right, the network is the computer. And then Microsoft IE, I'll say 6 because it's going to give an interesting history. That's a Microsoft page. We don't want that. Here's the Wikipedia page. 6 was the culmination before they finally retired it. But the Internet Explorer line of web browsers was put out in order to subtly undermine and derail. There were antitrust lawsuits over this. But, Internet Explorer was put out to kill Netscape because they were realizing the vision of Sun that the network is the computer. So everybody has known that nothing really matters except for the back-end systems, which has the philosophical stuff embedded into it that doesn't change over time. All the stuff layered on top of it is just the shell game. Is it the web browser? Is it X server, or is it Wayland? Is it Cocoa. It just doesn't matter. Microsoft's going to have their own one sitting on top of something that's a Linux kernel underneath. People think Linux is a desktop. Linux is not a desktop. Linux is a kernel. GNU Linux is the important concept there. Yeah, it's a whole nother video, but what we think of as Linux is really GNU Linux. It's just the low-level stuff that gets the hardware booted, plus a Unix-like command set, plus something in addition to give you the graphical user interface on top. We think of Unix as if it were the Ubuntu desktop. That's the GNOME desktop layered on top of that. Stop me before I create another tab. GNOME. Let's see what GNOME comes up with. Yeah, gnome.org, GNOME here. Disintermediary page. GNU GNOME. It's GNU GNOME. This is the desktop for Unix. And when people, for Linux, when people think to themselves Linux is a desktop, this is usually the thing that's being invoked, or some customized version of that. Or XFCE, as Ben keeps reminding me. You said you know way less than you know. One of my favorite quotes is, "The larger the island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of wonder." Scott M. Yeah, that's close to my heart. The most wise people in the world, say that their main thing is that they really don't know. They know how much they don't know. Socrates is often attributed with that quote, as is Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein used to say things along those lines too. It's so much we don't know. We're just like the surface. The way we see the world, the way we see the surface things of the world reflecting back, that's our depth of understanding. We don't have that X-ray vision. We don't see through things. We don't see the beating hearts and the streaming energies and the rippling waves. We just don't know. We have such a surface experience of life. Ben says, I've been a big Richard Hamming fan. I don't know him. I'm going to Google him. Thompson and Ritchie were the first winners of the Hamming Medal. Okay, so let me Google that and add that to my Instapaper. This is my methodology. Nice. Richard Wesley Hamming, American mathematician whose work had many implications for computer engineering and telecom. His contributions include his code, a lot of code. I'll have to figure out what those are. Oh, like ham mode on the Amiga. Interesting. Yeah, the Amiga had 4096 on-screen colors because of ham mode, which must have been a reference to this. Hold and modify was actually what ham stood for on the Amiga, but I'm seeing overtones of that here. Class of binary linear code. I wish I knew math better. I will master the shortcomings in math that I do not have yet. Am I wrapping up? I might be wrapping up. I had achieved quite a lot. I know what I don't know here. It's the network context for LXD. I need to get that network context down for stuff to continue working, right? Glinda of Oz. We get down to the 14 Books of Oz as my last tab. And then Scott M says back to Ben. Yeah, having worked in technology all my life, I've been a big fan of history of technology development and the men and women who had the vision to see the future. I love that. I know it's so much less than I should, but to me, it's more interesting than, sports that people put so much time into. It's so much more interesting than music, which so much time gets put into. It's one of the great pastimes of life, understanding who is shaping our world through technology and how. And it's not just physical hard technology. A lot of attention is put on information tech and digital electronics. And those are very important areas. But there's also all forms of biotech. And I can't repeat enough, one of my favorite people of late, his name is Michael Levin as well. And with this Michael Levin, the bio... hard to even remember what kind of science it's called, but there it is. Biologist at Tufts University. What he's doing is he's showing that traits, physical traits, can be hereditarily handed down without it being coded into the DNA. That inherited traits can be predispositions of gene expression that is not specifically coded for in the DNA, but if you make a two-headed worm, through this process he does, their descendants will be two-headed as well. It's almost beyond belief. And it is the fundamental insights to life and how life works that, is being more greatly understood. That science, I believe the name that's being put on it is epigenetics. Do I have it right? Let's do just epigenetics on its own, because it sounds like the bad stuff from Star Trek, the epigenetic wars and stuff with the Wrath of Khan. But it does seem like that epigenetics is the name that's settling on this area of science, where when you talk about mind over matter, when you talk about thinking yourself into health, that your mental state and the electric fields that are projected throughout your body are not tree-hugging foo-foo stuff, it's correct. It is very real. You can think yourself to an older age. You can think yourself to longevity. And I plan to. I think nature's design, God, whatever have you, gave us 10 fingers for a reason, so that you can count on each finger that same number of 10, and that equates to rotations around the sun. We're supposed to have like 100 years. I'm completely convinced. I think that having only an average from 70 to 80 years is a sign of being out of harmony with our natural ways. I think that there's evidence in like even ancient writings and stuff that people lived to 100 more frequently when they weren't knocked off by unnatural means. And that we need to think ourselves into that through the process of epigenetics. Forget breakthroughs, forget actual like science and drugs and changing the ends of the shoelaces of our DNA. There's talk about that. The aglets on our DNA wear out, and it's like the fuse for our old age. So, yeah, I'm rambling now. Saw an interview with Bill Gates a few years back. He said that if he were starting out again today, he would be in the biotech field. Innovation in that industry is in its infancy. Yeah, Innovation in biotech is in its infancy, and information tech helps it out a lot because we can do a lot of the protein folding experiments a lot more humanely and testing the drugs a lot more humanely. We can do at least the first and second pass of the effect that things have in computers, which will just be getting better and better without having to experiment on the animals themselves. But even on the low level stuff, I mean, we're creating life from scratch, man. We're doing the basic, RNA, DNA tricks completely synthetically. Synthetic life is real. If you haven't, my other thing, in addition to the worms that are like really cool, is just synthetic life. It's hacking. It's not like we build it up atom by atom, but synthetic biology is now a real thing where, we've created artificial biological life. Artificial biological life. Sorry. Life like cells from scratch. They're saying from scratch. And this is 2018. There were new studies about this where they allowed them to self-replicate, right? So they could create things that had many of the basic functions of life, like scavenging for resources and eating. But they have recently gotten reproduction. So, various scenarios, the sci-fi paranoid mind kicks in, that various scenarios of, gray goo, stuff comes to mind. But I think they talked a lot about Pac-Man when the last time it reached the news because it looked like a Pac-Man. Pac-Man shaped blobs become world's first self-replicating. See, that was December 2021. World's first self-replicating biological robots. It's hard to tell how much of this is hyperbole, but, through various hacking things, similar to the white blood cell experimentation we're doing, we are able to create, quote, from scratch, biological robots that can eat and reproduce. Crazy nuts. So, I'm not going to be one of these scientists. I think at 51 years old, it's a little too late for me to join these. I covet it. I follow it in science. I'm like a cheerleader on the side. It dovetails very nicely with my sci-fi reading. See, they're mentioning stem cells here. However, my humble little contribution is honestly the way Unix fits into the whole big picture. There's not a project like that going on in the world that isn't back-ended by information systems that are either Unix or Linux. You think Windows is doing this stuff? Maybe occasionally there's a desktop piece of software that's Windows-driven, but 99 times out of 100, it's, Unix and Linux, back-ended data systems. Yeah. Great hanging out with you guys again, too. Great conversations. I'm going to be wrapping up, too. I just got an email in. Even though it's a day off, I want to make sure everything is good before I switch into packing mode for the move. And 9, 10, 11, I've been out at this for over 2 hours. Thanks for everyone for joining in. Thanks, Scott M. Thanks, Bob. And I think at the beginning there's AZ there. It's great conversation. Super exciting to have, Emacs Lisp programmers on the chat and to have 20-year veterans of Murray Hill Bell Labs. Wow. Hope to see you guys soon. And that's it. End stream.